Welcome to Retirement Rescue Radio, a show specifically designed to help retirees and pre-retirees maximize their financial efficiency so you can live the retirement lifestyle you've always imagined. Your host is Nate Miller, investment advisor representative and author of the CPR Retirement Rescue Roadmap. Nate discusses thoughts and ideas from some of today's most knowledgeable professionals in the field of finance. He offers strategies along the way to help you make better financial decisions so you can maximize your retirement. This is Retirement Rescue Radio.
Retirement Rescue Radio listeners, I hope all of you enjoy this episode's guest. If you enjoyed my episode with Yani Burmeister on the foundational movement system, flexibility, and mobility as we age, you're going to love this episode with his brother, Yani. If you remember from the episode with Rad, he mentioned that he knew, what he knew about intermittent fasting, he got from his brother, Yani. Yani was one that has done all of the research on it and could give a very in-depth dive into intermittent fasting, the health benefits, and also muscle loss as we age, which we definitely do. I'll give you a little bit of background on Yani. Obviously grew up with his brother Rad in Australia, and he'd been active throughout his entire life. He's played soccer, rugby, even amateur boxing until age 30. And during that time, he was known to push his body to the limits, often, beyond the breaking point. And as a result, has suffered a lot of serious injuries, in addition to what he mentions at the very beginning of our interview, and that has actually it became an asset to the personal training business, and he's had to master the art of overcoming a lot of life's setbacks, and that's empowered him to specialize in positive mindset coaching and physical movement practices that ultimately led to he and his brother Rad developing the foundational movement system. And we'll have all the same giveaways that we had with Rad as well, which include the discounted rate for the foundational movement, the 18-minute stretching routine, which they developed, which I also have purchased, and even a discount on the online coaching that they offer, which is normally $49 a month, and they offer a first month absolutely free. So that's awesome. But then also he mentions quite a few sources for intermittent fasting. A gentleman by the name of Dr. Sachin Panda. There's several different videos you can watch on him to understand more of the health benefits of intermittent fasting. And also, so here's some of the things that we go through. We do give you the actual definition of intermittent fasting, the statistics behind it, a lot of the health benefits of intermittent fasting, and how that also plays into muscle loss as we age and actually helps kind of counteract muscle loss as we age a little bit better. Talks about cellular autophagy. Well, there's a $100 word for y'all out there. Cellular autophagy is basically the repairing of damaged cells, and how intermittent fasting actually helps with that. How fasting can help you through the workday if you are still working, those of you that aren't completely retired, but actually helps give you more energy. So even if you are retired, you can do more of the things that you love. What foods, if you are going to try intermittent fasting, what foods to break your fast with. We even dive deep into women and intermittent fasting, because there are some myths out there that makes women believe that they may not be able to actually do intermittent fasting. And so we go deep into that as well. And in the importance of the transition period, if you are going to start doing this, how to do it so that you end up doing it successfully rather than getting discouraged and quitting. And then towards the end, so you'll have to stick around for quite the majority of the podcast here, Yani explains what he believes is the natural fountain of youth. And so I hope y'all enjoy this episode with Yani Burmeister and intermittent fasting, because I think that if there are any of you that do want to try this as a new diet program, I think you'll be able to see a lot of the benefits that I've noticed by doing intermittent fasting, time-delayed eating as well. And by the way, so I found out that is what I'm doing, time-delayed eating. It's not actually intermittent fasting. But after this episode, after this interview that I had with Yani, I did my very first 24-hour fast 2 days later and nailed it. kicked its butt. So apparently, since I've been doing the time delayed eating for so long, 16/8, it was nothing to just go for the full 24-hour fast. And I felt great. I was not hungry. The only thing that I noticed was like I just wanted to eat something. I just wanted something tasty, in my mouth. That was it. So it really wasn't that I was any more hungrier than what I ever noticed when I was doing the time delayed, but hadn't done the full 24-hour fast. So yeah, I might mix that in maybe a couple times a month, once a month, something like that, to do a full 24-hour fast going forward to get the health benefits of that. Also of note, you'll notice this as soon as the interview starts. The audio on my end is not the quality that you have normally come to expect from our interviews, and I had a different microphone. It was not the microphone that I normally use, and therefore you can still hear me just fine. It's just that it's very echoey. My voice is very echoey. So I apologize up front. Hopefully that doesn't detract you from listening, because like I said, you can still hear me. It just ends up being a little echoey. Yanni ends up coming through just fine. He's not echoey. He sounds perfect. So once again, apologize for that, and hopefully you can look past that, and after a little while just not even notice it. But the information on here is great. I hope you guys enjoy this as much as I enjoyed recording it. Thanks. 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 Well, Retirement Rescue Radio listeners, welcome. We've got another very special guest with us today. If you enjoyed my interview with Rad Burmeister, we have his brother Yani Burmeister here today. And if you remember, Rad mentioned that Yani was going to be talking to us. He was the expert when it came to intermittent fasting and also muscle loss as we age. And so we're going to be diving deep into that. So Yani, welcome.
Thank you very much for the warm welcome, and hello to everyone listening.
And so Yani, are you ready to help rescue some retirements?
Absolutely.
Great. Well, now, before we get too into this, I always like to start off like this because, I went through a lot of stuff in the bio, and honestly, a lot of people can find information on you out in the internet, right? But is there anything unique about you or interesting that we don't know that would be unique for you or interesting?
Yeah, certainly. I think probably the most unique thing about Rad and I is that we grew up on a farm in the country over here in Australia, and I used to ride a horse to and from my school. The school only had about 25 kids, and we were in the middle of a bunch of paddocks, so we could actually leave our horses there during the day. And on one day riding home, I actually came off my horse. It had given birth to a foal and was going a little bit nuts, and I was dragged, and it broke my back. So that's been the big I guess hurdle that I've overcome over the last 35 years to really maintain a level of strength in my body, in my core. And it's also one of the reasons that compelled me to look into intermittent fasting, because I was looking for ways to upregulate cellular healing, because it helps on an organ level and a tissue, but also on a tissue level. And that's something that we can dive deeper into in today's interview.
Oh, definitely. So you're no stranger to injuries then?
Absolutely not. No, I've pushed my body to the limit far too many times. And that horse riding injury was really just the start of it.
Yeah, well, I think you and me both. We could probably talk about that for a while. But you are proof that there is life after breaking a back.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's something that, you either let it defeat you or you thrive to overcome it. And Rad and I have both suffered, surprisingly, both suffered spinal fractures in our life. His was in the army. Mine was much younger. I was lucky because when you're a child, of course, you've got a lot more growth hormone, which helps to heal when in times of need like that. But when Rad hurt his back in the army, it was far more serious because he, was at the other end of his life. Well, he was middle-aged. He was in his mid-30s. So yeah, there's definitely life after it, though.
Definitely. Okay, so yeah, let's just jump right into the intermittent fasting. And I guess first off, we probably need to define that, because even in my own industry, in the financial industry, there's a lot of what I call $100 words that are thrown out or thrown around.
Yep.
They're specifically in industries. So those listening may not exactly understand. So what would be your definition, or maybe the formal definition of intermittent fasting?
It's actually a really good question, because there's a lot of confusion here. The majority of people who sort of claim that they're doing intermittent fasting are actually doing what's referred to as time-restricted eating. And there are a lot of crossovers between time-restricted eating and intermittent fasting. But to use the term fasting, you usually have to abstain from food for a minimum of 24 hours. So an intermittent fast is abstinence from food for 24 or more hours. And, most people, even myself, I do a 16-8 time-restricted eating window. So I eat for 8 hours and fast, using the term fast quite loosely, for 12 hours. And what these time-restricted eating regimes are doing is mimicking the physiology and the physiology pathways of a true fast. But that's probably the first thing I'd say. Intermittent fasting is abstinence from food for a minimum of 24 hours.
Okay. And yeah, I think Red told me, yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm not actually fasting. I'm doing the time delay. So what would be the health benefits of intermittent fasting?
This question really depends on how long we've got the answer. But I'll start by saying it's a gray area a little bit, because currently most of the research has been done on animals, and that's not to say that we're not doing a lot of research on humans. There is currently right now a ginormous study going on humans from an amazing research scientist called Dr. Sachin Panda, who's in the Salk Institute in California. And he's created an app, and he's created a whole system where anyone can partake in that study, which I'll share some links with you guys, because it's really, really good. But the benefits, the immediate benefits of fasting that we do know in humans is that it dramatically upregulates cellular autophagy, which is, to be very simple about it, it is the body's internal house cleaning system of healing cells. The cells over time have damaged protein components, and those components need to be identified first. Then they need to be repaired or replaced with new working healthy components. And then after all that happens, any damaged components through that process need to be extricated or removed from the cell. And that whole process is called cellular autophagy. Now, it's a very big deal. There was a Japanese research scientist working out of the United States in 2016, awarded the Nobel Prize for his work on cellular autophagy and his discovery of the mechanisms and pathways for this. And then in 2017, 3 American scientists were also awarded a Nobel Prize for their work on circadian rhythm. And this all ties in together, because we now know, thanks to these people, that the circadian rhythm and our cell's ability to heal itself are intrinsically linked. So that's probably the biggest benefit. And I know I've sort of dived off on a tangent there, but it's a really big deal, and it's really important for people to understand. And this is where my passion lies. We just simply weren't ever meant to eat food constantly throughout the day. Our evolution is not really prepared and designed for that. And I heard a really great quote by Dr. Sachin Panda in one of his TED Talks, where he says, it's like when we repair a freeway. You can't repair a freeway when the cars are still driving down it, and you can't repair your body and your body's internals when there's food coming down the digestive system constantly. That's just how the body works. And I think that sort of makes it quite clear, So the first thing is that cellular healing. But what we're finding now, and as I said, most of this has been done in animal studies, and then now the funding for these sorts of scientific studies only come about every 5 to 7 years. So now we're playing the waiting game to wait until they do all of this research and replicate it on humans. But we've found quite amazing adaptations occur in the animal studies with muscle, lean muscle mass. There's an evolutionary trigger point that occurs when the body is forced to switch from using blood glycogen, which is the sugar and carbohydrate that we're usually using for energy. When we fast, we click over to using fatty acids for our energy and our body's fuel source. And this has some sort of an evolutionary switch that also triggers the retention of lean muscle mass. And for your audience, this is something that would really, really be worth looking into and worth keeping an eye on, because we will talk about this a bit later, but it is a real problem after the age of about 50 years old. People are losing muscle mass at an annual rate of 1 to 2%. And that can even go higher if you're not stimulating the muscle, up to 3%. So it's, and they refer to that as sarcopenia. It's a big problem, you know, because frailty, if we don't die from cancer or heart disease, we die from frailty. We fall and break something, and then it's downhill, you know. So it all really ties together. The muscle mass thing, but benefit to fasting is something that I'm looking into, because as a gym owner, I want to look at anyway. We train people usually from the ages of 35 to 55. That's our demographic. Mm-hmm. And our primary goal is to build or maintain muscle tissue, because it is so important. So that's an area I'm really fascinated with. So we've got that upregulation of cellular autophagy. We've got the maintenance of muscle tissue, which is absolutely black and white in my studies. And now we're going to replicate that in human studies. And I think you'll see the results of that research in about 5 years, but it is very compelling at the moment. And then on top of that, we have the concept of metabolic flexibility, which is what I tipped on before, the body's ability to transition between using carbohydrate, essentially, or glycogen, if you want the scientific term, and fat as your primary fuel source. Now, we somehow along the lines have just stopped doing that, and we've primarily used carbohydrate, and we now are linking that to brain degenerative diseases, because it just doesn't seem to be very good for the brain to be fueling on carbohydrate all the time. So there's a big area of excitement around this. You know, you would have seen the ketogenic diet craze explode over the last few years, and it's you know, we don't know yet if it's really as good as everyone makes it out to be, but it's certainly got my attention. But what we do definitely know is that it's very healthy to be metabolically flexible. We should be able to cross between those two different energy substrates with ease, and we know that there are really good health benefits to that, because obviously it's gonna be in everyone's best interest to be efficient at metabolizing fat, you know. Mm-hmm. And so that's the third really, really big promising benefit to intermittent fasting, is that you exercise that metabolic flexibility. And every time you go into a fast, your blood glycogen is depleted after about 6 to 8 hours, and then your body is forced to look elsewhere for another fuel source, and it turns to the body's fat stores. And you know, I should make it clear that there's a difference between fat metabolization and weight loss, you know, and the two aren't intrinsically linked. If you're metabolizing more fat, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're gonna lose weight, okay? And this is the argument that goes on between the keto zealots, who believe that, you know, if you just eat fat all the time, you'll become better at metabolizing fat, and then you'll lose weight. Your body will burn off excess fat. It's not true. You become much better at metabolizing fat, but you metabolize that's because you're eating so much more fat. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense.
So I want to be careful where, you know, I don't want people to think, okay, if I go ketogenic, I'm going to all of a sudden become lean. That's not how it works. But there is massive physiological benefits to exercising that flexibility, and you get that from fasting. So those are the three really, really big benefits that are proven. Beyond that, there are a whole host of other smaller benefits, like when we fast, our body produces more norepinephrine and epinephrine, which are the hormones that heighten your awareness. We're designed to produce those hormones under stress, and when the body is in cellular starvation, it's mimicking that process. And what that does on a day-to-day basis for the average individual is it switches on, it upregulates cognitive ability. So what Rad and I have found with I've had the most success with my clients who are around the age of 50 years old. I'm blessed to be training quite affluent clients who are usually CEOs of fairly successful companies, and these men and women need to operate at a high level. And I mean, everyone wants to. We all want to have a high functioning brain. But one of the sort of hidden benefits to intermittent fasting that I've had with my clients is that after they get through the transition period, which I'll talk about momentarily, they say, my God, I can think more clearly. I'm operating at a much higher level than I was before. And that's because of these fight or flight hormones being released in the body when you're in a state of cellular starvation. And it's really, we think it's an evolutionary mechanism that was designed to keep us alive. When we need to hunt, we need to have our wits about us. And that's really the best explanation I've heard for that. But
Yani, I can give you an example. I did that study today. Before I broke my fast, I was on the ball. I was just knocking things out left and right. And as soon as I broke my fast and had lunch, about half an hour later, I almost wanted to fall asleep. So
that's right.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Definitely more aware, more alert, and ready to get things done before breaking the fast.
Yeah, that's right. That's absolutely right. And the last point I'll say, which is I think really, really important for your audience specifically, is that the cellular autophagy, which we spoke about first, they have now, and this is one of the big studies that came out a couple of years ago that was awarded the Nobel Prize. We've linked the breakdown of cellular autophagy to the disease mechanism. It is a key component of the disease mechanism. And so we know now that when we downregulate cellular autophagy, one of the ways is to be overweight and consuming food too much. Then we are more exposed and more likely to suffer from diseases, degenerative diseases like cancer, osteoporosis, diabetes, heart disease, brain diseases, especially Alzheimer's disease. And so we want to be looking at ways, any way possible, to be upregulating cellular autophagy. And there are 3 ways to do that. We know this now with a lot of really, really great research. The first one is to exercise. Exercise induces cellular starvation because we're sucking everything, all the energy out of every cell in the body when we're exercising. And then when we refeed, we replenish those energy stores. So exercise really switches on autophagy. Then any sort of caloric deficit will do so as well. So any diet that you go on where you go into calorie deficit, so a weight loss diet, that will, to a degree, upregulate cellular autophagy. But the gold standard mechanism for cellular autophagy is when you go into a fasted state. It's just where it's like the magic hour. It's where the magic starts to happen, and the benefits increase exponentially the longer you stay in fast. And I have looked at a very, very great research. I think he's an Italian research scientist. Longo, Dr. Longo is looking into this quite heavily, and they are finding amazing things occurring on a physiological level after 72 hours and even 5 days of fasting. Now, those sorts of fasts we recommend people do under a supervision from a doctor, particularly for the first time that you do it, because if you're diabetic or if you're pre-diabetic, you can go hypoglycemic when you experiment with fasting to that degree. But I had one of my 55-year-old clients who's the CEO of a construction company here in Australia, very high operating individual. He did a 5-day fast last year, and he felt amazing. He at the end of it, he was like, God, I don't want to start eating again, because he was just absolutely crushing it. And this is what my book is about, which we can talk about later. It needs to happen on a progressive nature. You can't just dive into you can't even dive into intermittent fasting straight away with good results. I found you need a progressive approach to it, which I'm happy to talk to you guys about.
We definitely need to talk about that, because I think a lot of people, and this has been referred to a lot of times, that we're in a microwave society. We expect things to happen so quickly that we don't stay the course long enough to see the benefits of something. And so if somebody tries doing intermittent fasting and they just go like full force trying to do the whole 24 hours right off the bat, their brain is going to be telling them all kinds of crazy stuff, I think, right when that starts happening. So that transition period into it, I think, is really, really important. So yes, definitely touch on that if you can.
I love that microwave society.
Yeah.
I talk about that a lot in my book. That's exactly right. Look, as with any intervention in lifestyle, and especially when you're building habits or new regimes, a progressive nature is very important. We do this with our exercise. Our exercise program is very, very progressive in nature, and we should consider any nutrition intervention progressive as well, because although it's obviously slower to get or to see a tangible result, it's more important that you actually do something that you can stick with. And this is the problem with diets. I have a close friend here who's a brilliant cardiologist, Dr. Ross Walker, who has a book called Diets Don't Work. And he says, diets are like a holiday. You got to come home at some point from a holiday, just like you always rebound from a diet, and the problem is that most diets are not progressive in nature, and they're not, they use variables that are just not really sustainable for the average person. There's two key elements to a diet that have to, and surprisingly enough, you'll be interested maybe to know this. Of all the diets that have been studied, and there's a lot of metadata on diets now, we've got thousands and thousands, probably tens of thousands of studies on diets and metadata. And the most amazing thing is that the most successful diet of all time is Weight Watchers. And the keto and the intermittent fasting and we hate to hear that, but there are two key elements to a diet that have to take place for the diet to work. And for a successful diet, they measure whether the person was able to maintain the weight loss or the body composition for 3 or more years. That's success in a nutrition intervention. And the two key elements are daily cognitive restraint, meaning that you have to practice and get used to the concept of being hungry and food or nutrition abstinence. So being able to refrain from food, they refer to that as daily cognitive restraint. And the second is that you have to track or record your calories or macronutrients to some degree. And Weight Watchers have a system where they have a support group that helps you through that daily cognitive restraint. And they have a numbers gamification with their tracking system where they have their points system. And that sort of works with people, Now, I don't believe that it's the best diet because they still allow a lot of processed and refined foods. That's the only way they can package their food, and I don't think that's good for someone long term. But from a weight loss standpoint, they get the two key elements really, really right, and that's how they have the best retention on the diet, Mm-hmm. So those are two very, very key elements if you're trying to lose weight. Now, the thing I love about intermittent fasting is that it forces you to practice that daily cognitive restraint. And I think this is the one of the most important key hidden benefits that I didn't talk about before is that you experience this untethering from food, which I'm sure you can relate to, Nate, when you're working throughout the day and it gets to 4 o'clock in the afternoon or 3. You know, Rad and I had this the other day. We were really blasting through on a task that we were rolling out, a job, a project, and it got to 4 o'clock and neither of us had broken fast yet, you know, and we both fast from about 7, 8 o'clock at night until usually about midday the next day. Mm-hmm. And, you know, a normal person would have freaked out at that, you know, but it's quite normal for us because we also do periodic 24-hour fasts, and I have fasted periodically for a while, up to 72 hours a few times a year. And so I just don't find it a problem, you know. So there's this powerful untethering from food that I think is one of the most important hidden benefits to intermittent fasting. So it nails that daily cognitive restraint really well. And then from that point on, I think you become more aware of your food, and you're not necessarily tracking calories or macros, but you certainly become more aware of what you break your fast with, because certain foods, you become, and you said this before, you become more sensitive to the food you eat. So you become more aware of, okay, if I break my fast with fish and chips that are deep fried and very high in refined carbohydrate, I'm going to feel really sluggish afterwards, you know.
Oh, so yes, I've heard that whatever you break your fast with, if you could just imagine your body just completely grabs a hold of that, you know, as the very first thing that it gets and like gloms onto it. And so, yeah, that's very important what you break your fast with. Yeah, so keep talking about that.
That's exactly right. The hands down the best thing. So what happens, and I'll explain this for everyone so they understand. There's a gut barrier that's very important in your digestive system, and it's a mucus barrier. It doesn't sound very sexy to talk about it, but when you abstain from food for long enough, which is usually 12 to 16 hours, the gut barrier sort of breaks down because it's not needed anymore. And you get rid of it. It sort of breaks down, and you either pass it through your going to the toilet, going to the bathroom, or it just sort of breaks down and digests and metabolizes. And it's important because that gut barrier protects your body from pathogens and chemicals and toxins that you don't necessarily want in your gut, you know, and you don't want your gut microbiota to have to deal with that stuff. And so when we fast for a long period of time, it is important what we break our fast with. You don't want to go and break your fast with something that's really heavily processed, because you don't really have that important gut barrier there. The best thing to break your fast with really is like a broth. You want as much collagen in your first meal as possible. And, you know, most brothy, like meat stews, things like that are really good. If you can, like, we're a really big fan, Rad and I are a big fan of slow cooking, because you get a bit of that bone broth. You can put like you can do a lamb shank slow cook or something like that. And then that will have a lot of collagen in it, which is a really great meal to break fast with. There are also other options. We use beef collagen protein as a supplement, as a nutrition supplement. And so we may make like a health smoothie and base it with beef collagen protein, which is another great way to break a fast because it's very gentle on the digestive system, and you're getting that collagen straight into your gut, which is going to help really build up that gut barrier again. And that's probably, I'd say, the gold standard, the best way to break a fast. But I wouldn't, you know, I don't want to freak anyone out who's sitting there on the fence thinking, oh, maybe I'm going to try this. Don't worry about the complexities of it too much, you know. But I will say that, you know, intermittent fasting is brilliant for longevity and health from a macro standpoint, but it's only good from a weight loss standpoint if you do watch what you eat. You know, it's not a magic pill that will just solve all of your problems and allow you to, you know, eat absolute junk all the time, because there is something else happening there that's really important, which is that gut microbiota, the bacteria in the gut, and they feed off the different types of food, you know. So essentially there will be certain bacteria that thrive on processed and refined sugars, fats, and salts. And then there will be certain gut bacteria that thrive on fresh fruits, vegetables, and whole grains and meat. And those are the gut bacteria you want thriving, because the gut bacteria now, there's a huge study taking place here at the University of Sydney, Australia. It's called the Gut Microbiome Project. And they're finding that it has a huge link to obesity, and it has a huge link to depression and all of that, because the gut microbiome has an effect on our mood and our food cravings and all sorts of things. I've had to add an entire chapter to my book on this because it's very new science, but it's very, very interesting. And so, you know, even if you're intermittent fasting and you're getting all of these amazing health benefits during that fasted period, during your refeed periods, there's also really, really good benefits to watching what you eat, you know?
There's a couple things that you said there I want to touch on here real quick. First off, I'll explain kind of, you know, you mentioned don't make it too complex. It couldn't just be simple. I'll explain how I normally break my fast, and you can tell me if it's really dumb or if it's smart. But then also you're talking about this gut biome a lot, and my wife has been reading a ton about gut biome. And so then we'll touch on women in intermittent fasting and some of the maybe myths or things surrounding that. So the first thing I want to talk about then is how simple that I made when I was doing I guess it wasn't totally intermittent fasting, but it was the time delayed eating that you guys corrected me on. It was as simple as I would normally get up every day, work out, and then make breakfast. I'd have about 5 or 6 scrambled eggs and about 3/4 cup dry oats that I would, you know, of course, make into, oatmeal or whatever. And that's normally how I would break my fast. When I started doing intermittent fasting, instead of eating it right then in the morning, I made it, and then I just took it with me. And inside the scrambled eggs, a lot of times what I put with that is going to be some baby spinach or some red onion, white onion, green onion, whatever I've got available there. And then I'll put some type of a smoked Tabasco sauce on it for a little bit of flavor. I do like a little spice on there. And so that's normally how I break my fast.
Yeah, that's great. You know, you're getting a really nice hit of protein there, which is essential, really, and that's something that we should certainly tip on. And you're getting some greens, which is really, really great to get that pH level up. It's going to help with your gut, and then you're getting some great fiber, you know, from the oats. So it's good. It's very good.
Okay, well, good. Well, and I guess the next thing we'll touch on is the intermittent fasting for women, because, you know, I think I've read a lot of differencing of opinions out there, and my wife the same way, is that they feel like women have to do something different, or even like so far it is can't do intermittent fasting because of the difference in hormones between men and women. So I guess touch on that for a little while if you could.
Absolutely. So this is something that I looked into quite heavily, because my partner Kalisha, when we started fasting about for almost 5 years ago, because after we had our first child, we both gained a bit of weight. We you know, it was very difficult. We've had 2 children that are not good sleepers, and it just made everything a little bit harder. And that coincided with me transitioning through my mid-30s. I'm 39 years old now, and things just got harder. You know, you've got more responsibility, things like that. Mm-hmm. And so we looked at a different way of staying in shape that would have more of an impact, and also help with my energy levels and things like that. We were both suffering a little bit of sleep-deprived driven depression at the time, and so there were a lot of things that compelled me to investigate and explore fasting. Kalisha had really, really good results initially doing it. We both lost all of the weight we gained within sort of 12 weeks, and we were feeling really, really great. And I rolled it out across the board after my experiences with my team here, and we had a female trainer who really struggled with it. She just sort of went crazy, you know, and I thought, wow, okay, is it something that I should be aware of? And so I went and really looked into it. I'm very lucky. I've got a network of scientists who are friends of mine who do a lot of the research, you know, so I've got a lot of great people I can reach out to, not only reading studies, I can talk with the people who do the studies. And the reality is that there's no difference from men to women, with exception to the fact that women have a slightly different hormonal profile, which due to the system in your body that creates babies. I'm having a brain blank here.
The reproductive system?
The reproductive system, my God.
Here for a second, Yanni, I want a tangent on this, all right? So I read a study that said if you forget just normal words like reproductive system, right? That's actually a sign of intelligence.
Yeah.
When you forget normal things that you should normally remember, because what your brain does is it's always trying to figure out what is the most important thing that I need to know right now. And so it's trying to optimize what it knows. And so it just forgets something that shouldn't be that important, you know? And I always say it like this, man, if I can Google something in 5 seconds, I'm probably not going to remember it. I'm going to remember that I can Google it, but that's it. So if you're forgetting normal stuff like that, you might just be a genius.
I'm going to take that to the bank, Nate. I'm very happy you said that. So because of the reproductive system, I'll get back on track. The only evidence that I can find that it's different from men and women that seems to stand up, that has some validity, is that they may experience the transition period a little bit harder than men because their body fights against the cellular starvation a little bit more. Because the first system, what the body does when we go into caloric deficit, a prolonged caloric deficit, is that the body will start to shut down systems that require energy. And the first system that is shut down in women is the reproductive system, because it's not life-threatening. It's not something that needs to be there to sustain life. And the body naturally will fight against that a little bit. And the way it does that is that it gives you hunger pains and a little bit more of a food craving, you know. But the reality is that the majority of the transition period is dictated by your previous lifestyle. And by that, I mean, if you are someone who's been raised on, a high carbohydrate diet or a high sugar diet or a high processed food diet, you're going to experience that transition period much more than someone who was raised on whole foods, because you know your body is, and it seems to be, and I don't know, and I may get absolutely hammered by the nutrition scientists that listen. There seems to be harder food cravings coming from the bacteria that thrive on processed and refined sugar. Now, I also know that in conjunction with that, the processed and refined sugar and the engineered processed foods, which are usually a combination of sugar, fat, and salt, heavily processed, they do hijack the dopamine receptors in the brain. So there is that addictive nature associated with those types of foods. And so I believe that plays a role in how hard you go through the transition period. But as far as women, if I can bring it back onto the question, how does this affect women more? It just seems to amplify that experience a little bit, because their body is also trying to say, hey, you know, if we continue with this, I may have to shut down my reproductive system, and that might not be beneficial, because, you know, when it comes down to it, our bodies are designed to procreate and defend ourselves. There are like prehistoric sort of mechanisms or systems in the body that are trying to maintain their purpose, you know, and one of those for women is procreation. So, but on a physiological level, whether it's healthy, whether it's dangerous, there is absolutely nothing that I have seen, and I've spoken to a lot of people who I would consider an authority figure in this on the matter, and I'm attending a summit in July again with 4 of the top research scientists and the hot topic, nutrition research scientists in the world, and the hot topic is autophagy, intermittent fasting, time-restricted eating, and circadian health. So I'll be able to bring a little bit more to the table because there's going to be another wave of more current data that I can furnish my arguments with here. But to my knowledge, there is no difference except for the fact that they have to be a little bit stronger minded and willed, because their body sends them slightly, it fights the urge a little bit more, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. So yeah, that harder transition period, that absolutely makes sense, because my wife, the few times that she actually has tried to adopt the intermittent fasting, has struggled with that transition period far more than what I did. And so she, once again, the stories that we tell each other, well, maybe I can't do that. Maybe I'm one of those people that just has, low blood sugar or whatever. So that there's a lot of that was going on. So yeah, it just maybe the transition period needs to be a little bit hard. Maybe I pushed her to do the 16-8 a little bit too quickly, and, we need to transition a little bit slower.
So if I may, this gives a great little run into what I wanted to talk about as far as being a progressive system or approach to fasting, because most people get this wrong. And I used to be the type of person that if I didn't eat every 2 to 3 hours, I got really dizzy. And we actually, because I've got a close friend who is a practicing cardiologist, we were able to study this and see what the mechanism was. And we measured over a week. I wore a machine that measured my heart rate, my blood pressure, everything really accurately to see what was going on. And my blood pressure was dropping right down. My standard heart rate is at rest is about 44 beats per minute, which is incredibly low already.
Yeah,
and my heart,
like 52. So that's
yeah, that's right. My heart rate was dropping down to 32 beats per minute, which when I was abstaining from food. And so we sort of thought, wow, what is going on here? And I would get really dizzy and I'd go pale and it just felt like I was going to die. I thought something was really wrong, So I can certainly relate to people that don't feel good. But really what was happening was that my body was just trying to figure out how to cross over between these two fuel sources. And I didn't have that metabolic flexibility. That was the problem. So my body was trying to shut down systems and minimize the amount of energy that it was consuming, because it literally thought that it was starving. And I was a Wheat Bix kid. I was raised on Wheat Bix and I had a very high carbohydrate diet. My father is a vegetarian. We weren't raised as vegetarians, but we were. It certainly impacted what was served at the dinner table. And so we were very, very used to using carbohydrate as the primary fuel source. And so that made the transition period quite difficult for me. But I was determined to persevere because I had sunk my teeth into a lot of the research and it was really, really compelling. It was compelling enough to make me go, okay, I'm going to figure out how to do this. But it did force me to look for ways to make it more progressive. And what we've done now is we've devised a 5-phase program that we take our clients through. And the first phase, which I think is a critical phase, is to deload the body from carbohydrate and improve your metabolic flexibility whilst not in a starvation mode. So whilst the cells aren't in that cellular starvation. So the way we do that is we do a 7-day carbohydrate deload. Each day we remove one more thing. So the first day might be that we remove carbohydrate from breakfast and we replace our breakfast cereal or our toast and eggs with a protein smoothie. We'll base it with some sort of a protein supplement. We might throw in some berries, frozen blueberries or raspberries, so you get some nice fiber. And then on the second day, we will do that again, but instead of having a sandwich for lunch, we will replace the sandwich just with a salad with some meat and, a few things like that. So each day we go through, we add one more thing. We remove carbohydrate from one more part of our day. And then on day 7, we have a carb-free day. So we have 0 carbohydrate. We may just have a little tiny bit of fiber supplement like a psyllium husk or a Metamucil or something. to help our digestive system, but we don't eat any carbohydrate. And then for a 7-day period after that, we have a what would be called a carb restricted diet, which is a maximum of sort of 150 grams of very high fiber carbohydrates. So we'd get that mostly from vegetables. And after that 7-day period, so 14 days in total, you are ready to do your first fasting period much better, because the body has already figured out how to cross over to fat metabolization. We've rehearsed that energy substrate, metabolic flexibility, and we seem to experience those hunger pains and the transition period much easier.
Okay, well, I think I'm just going to have my wife listen to this episode on repeat and be able to go through that. So then I think we've kind of covered this, but maybe if there's, I'll ask the question, maybe there's any, something I've missed so far. So this is definitely something that's safe for people that are over 50 and 60 to do. So is there anything they may want to take into consideration? Like, some of them may be on different medications as well. And so is there anything that needs to be taken into consideration in that regard?
Absolutely. And this is actually a really interesting topic, because the circadian rhythm research that Dr. Sachin Panda has been performing has uncovered some amazing things about the way our body processes both our food and other chemicals and things into the body. And as it turns out, it even affects medication. So what he's found is that during the day, when our body is most prepared for food, it coincides largely with when the sun is up, we're much more effective at metabolizing and processing different medication at certain times throughout the day. So it's certainly worth looking into that. But as far as fasting goes, what I like to do is with anyone, and that would be someone taking certain medications. The first thing is I would say always talk to your doctor or general practitioner before you change or intervene with your nutrition regime, because it's worth having them on side and being aware of it, and they may be able to tell you whether there's anything specific with the medications that you're taking. But second to that, I still follow this progressive approach. And, the phase 2 in our nutrition protocol, we call it the progressive fasting system, is that we do a 12-12 time restricted eating. So rather than dive right into this 16-8 protocol that you and I are doing, we do 12-12, which means for 12 hours, we have our feeding window, and we try to align that as best we can with when the sun is up. So we have an early dinner. And then for 12 hours, we abstain from anything except water. And it's important to understand that for the health benefits of this time-restricted eating, coffee is out as well, even black coffee. And I know that there are a lot of people who say black coffee is okay whilst fasting, and that from a caloric standpoint is true. And there are also polyphenols in coffee that upregulate cellular autophagy. So it's considered one of the foods that helps to switch on that cellular autophagy or upregulate it. But from a circadian rhythm standpoint, we have do we have time for me to explain this very quickly?
Yeah, you bet. Definitely. Because
okay.
Coffee is something that's very important to people's diets over here.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. So coffee is what's referred to as a xenobiotic, which means that it's a chemical that's been refined and produced outside of our body. And when we take it into our body has to process it. We don't produce it naturally inside the body. Now, for that to occur, we need digestive enzymes to switch on and to process and metabolize the chemicals in coffee. Our digestive enzymes, humans are diurnal creatures, meaning that we are operating during the day. We're not naturally nocturnal. I know shift workers try to bend the rule here, but naturally we are diurnal creatures, which is the opposite to nocturnal creatures like mice. And that goes for every single cell in our body and every single enzyme in our body. So where and where this is important is that the first thing that we take into our body that is not water switches on these digestive enzymes. And because the digestive enzymes are also diurnal creatures, they have this 12-hour circadian clock that they operate on. And once that 12-hour clock is complete, they go back to sleep. They don't literally go back to sleep, but they shut off, they stop working. And so it's very important to understand that when we consume coffee, food, alcohol outside of that that diurnal window, that 12-hour window, our body is much less able to process those foods or chemicals. And that is also included with our medication. So if we're taking medication really late at night, it's far less effective than if we're taking it throughout the day, which is really quite interesting because, and this is very, very new research that they're finding at the Salk Institute there in California. So what I would say is that for anyone in their if they're taking medication, or for your audience, for elderly people, follow that first phase of the carbohydrate deload, and then experiment first with a 12-12 time restricted eating and see how your body feels. It's a lot easier than diving straight into the 16-8, and start to align yourself with your circadian rhythm. A great, if your audience is interested, you can search on YouTube for Dr. Sachin Panda or Circadian Rhythm TED Talk, and you'll find he's done 2 very, very good TED Talks. They're only 20 minutes long, where he summarizes the work he's doing in a way that is really easily digestible for anyone. And he'll explain this in more detail, but it is absolutely safe for someone to do, but it is also really, really important that we start to align ourselves with our natural circadian rhythm, because even for the benefits of our medication, for the benefits of the food that we eat, once we go past that window, so that the moment we take a sip of coffee or a sip of tea or a bite of our breakfast in the morning, we reset that 12-hour circadian clock. And when that runs out, our body is no longer processing those foods. And that is detrimental to our health. And this is the area that I'm most interested in right now. It is really, really interesting. So Rad and I have made, we get up at 4:30 in the morning, or Rad gets up earlier in the morning. And our natural, we would get to work at 5:30 and have a coffee straight away. And then we would consume black coffee throughout the day to help us with our hunger pain strategically, and then break our fast with food at midday. So what we've done now is we've made a rule where we do sort of 7:30 till 7:30. It's a 12-hour window, so we're aligned with our circadian rhythm, and we abstain from black coffee as well during that period. And that's only really occurred in the last few months since I've looked into this new research that's coming out from Dr. Sachin Panda and his team. But it's certainly worth looking into.
Well, good. I think the normal time that I end up drinking coffee ends up being during that circadian time. So I'm glad that here I can still keep doing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And so we need to, I guess, focus a little bit now on muscle loss as we age too. And you mentioned something, even intermittent fasting does help out with not losing as much muscle as we age. So can you start talking about just like natural muscle loss and what we can do to I guess, not lose as much?
Absolutely. So of course, this is an area that I'm really interested in because I do very much like my muscle, and so does Rad. And we are essentially, after the age of about 30 years old, we are fighting to a degree, a losing battle, because our hormones that, the testosterone, the naturally produced testosterone, growth hormones, and all of the factors that help us to maintain our muscle tissue start to decline. And that amplifies every year as we get older. So it's certainly an area that you want to be you want to be working on. And the obvious solution to that is to exercise and do resistance training exercise more specifically, where we're lifting weight. but we want to attack it from diet intervention as well. And to optimize muscle protein synthesis, we need to make sure that we are consuming enough dietary protein. And that's the first thing. But then how do we factor that in? Because there's a research scientist here, Dr. Gary Slater in Australia. He's up at the Sunshine Coast University, who's sort of considered the godfather of muscle protein synthesis internationally. And he has found that the best way to optimize muscle protein synthesis is to eat every 2 to 3 hours the ideal dosage of protein. Mm-hmm. But how does that fit in when we're fasting for 12 to 16 hours a day? Because obviously we can't have protein for early breakfast in the morning. We'd miss our mid-morning sort of brunch protein hit, and then we have our first at lunch. So what Rad and I do, first of all, is we make sure that from 12 o'clock when we break our fast, it's something high in protein. And then we build every single meal. And we only fit 4 meals in during that period. We have 2 meals and then 2 sort of protein shakes. And we make sure that they're 2 hours apart to fit in with that 8-hour window. That's because we are trying to optimize protein synthesis and maximize our muscle tissue. But what we're finding with fasting is that it is, and this is still an area of the research that they're not 100% sure about. There are 2 theories that I think stack up, and one of them comes from Dr. Sachin Panda. What happens is when we when we do our intermittent fast, or when we fast, or when we do time-restricted eating, our body goes into this rapid healing process. And what happens in autophagy, the real powerful thing with autophagy is that rather than putting effort into healing a damaged cell, the body tends to, when cellular autophagy is upregulated, particularly when we're in a fasted state, the body has time and it has the ability to just identify the damaged component and say, I'm not even going to bother trying to heal that. I'm just going to replace it with a new one. Now, we don't do that when we're not in a fasted state. We work and we expend energy trying to repair what's there. And this is, his theory is that the body goes into this rapid state of muscle tissue healing, that where it just simply gets rid of damaged cells and replaces them with brand new cells. And that he believes that may be the mechanism that means that we end up with much better and much more lean muscle tissue when we're doing our intermittent fasting or time-restricted eating. And I think that's a really great theory. Now, they haven't been able to prove the mechanism yet. All they know is in the mice studies that they've done, that's the result they get. The mice that are on a time-restricted eating regime and it seems to happen at the 9-hour mark. So you are getting the benefits of this because you're doing 16-8, if I believe correct.
That is correct.
Yep. And so this muscle tissue repair mechanism seems to kick in at the 9-hour mark. So you have to be abstaining from food for 15 hours every day. And the mice that they've studied this end up with much more muscle tissue. And in some cases, it's 60% more muscle tissue, which is ridiculous. You know, that's a lot. So that, you know, I think that it's worth, and as I said, we've got to wait until they're able to replicate this in humans to really see and to be, you know, screaming it from the mountaintops. But it's enough for me to go, wow, okay, I'm going to abstain from food for 8 or 9 hours a day, irrespective of whether they've proved that in humans yet or not. But the other reason for it, and a lot of people will say that this is a benefit worth fasting for, is that you get an upregulation of growth hormone. Now, here's the thing. First and foremost, the growth hormone studies were only produced in prolonged fasting, true fasting. So to get that benefit, you've got to be fasting for sort of 3 to 5 days, which most people don't do, you know. And it seems to be that the body kicks in this massive upregulation of growth hormone to prevent muscle wastage or muscle loss in the abstinence of food. So, you know, there are theories that this is an evolutionary mechanism that would allow us to be able to go for long periods without food and still be able to hunt and do all the things we needed to do for survival. And I think that sounds, that sounds right. But yeah, look, the growth hormone study and the growth hormone benefits, a lot of the fasting zealots out there that are, screaming about intermittent fasting and selling intermittent fasting programs, they always quote this, you get this massive upregulation of human growth hormone, which is really beneficial, which it absolutely is. But none of them are advocating fasting for 3 to 5 days. They're talking about time-restricted eating, which they talk about as intermittent fasting. So I really don't give much credit to that. But that is certainly why I do prolonged fasts every year. It's a great thing to do. It also, all of those healing mechanisms are amplified when you do a prolonged fast, a true fast. So it's certainly worth doing, and it's worth experimenting with, as I will say again, under the supervision of your doctor for the first time at least, to make sure that you do it safely. But yeah, look, those are the reasons why it seems to maintain muscle tissue. And, from a personal perspective, I'm a vain person. I like the way I look with my clothes off, and so
I'm with you there, Yanni. I do too.
I wouldn't do anything that interfered with my body's ability to maintain a youthful looking muscular physique, and I've been doing intermittent fasting or time restricted eating now and true fasting periodically for 5 years, and I'm more muscular than or as muscular as I've ever been, and I'm older than I've ever been. So I believe that these mechanisms that are occurring in the animal studies certainly are replicable in humans. I'm doing my own little personal study on that, and it seems to work. And my clients as well. A large portion of our gym here does intermittent fasting, and they're certainly not losing muscle. Let me put it that way. But I think the magic for people and something that you should understand is that the magic happens when you combine exercise and fasting. And that is, we talked about how to switch on cellular autophagy earlier in the discussion. Exercise does it alone. And in fact, exercise and autophagy, you can't have one without the other. Very quickly, I'll digress here on a tangent, but I'll keep it short. They did a study in mice where they inhibited the autophagy. They were able to manipulate the genes in these mice so that the autophagy pathway was completely switched off. Then they exercised these mice, and they got no benefit from exercise whatsoever, meaning that without autophagy, you don't get the benefits of exercise. So if the autophagy process is switched off in your body somehow, then you don't actually get the benefits of exercise. Now, where this goes, where that research goes and how it fits in, I'm not sure yet, but it seems that you can't have one without the other. And furthermore, the benefits of cellular autophagy are dramatically amplified when we combine it with exercise. So we have a saying around here at Unity Gym: the true fountain of youth is time-restricted eating and exercise. Those two combined dramatically slow the aging process, and that's, I think, what your audience wants to be focusing on. Combine daily doses of meaningful exercise with time-restricted eating, even if it's only for 12 hours. Even if they can't get the 15-hour fast, and they can only do 12 hours and then exercise, they're going to benefit hugely from that.
Oh, absolutely, Yanni. That is definitely going to go into the introduction. It's like you have to listen to pretty much the entire podcast to understand where the fountain of youth really is.
That's right. Absolutely. And then if you can get that 12 hours, you slowly build up. And that's what I would suggest with your wife. Then aim for 13 hours, then aim for 14 hours, 15, and then maybe build up to 16. And we actually do that over a 4 to 6 week period. So we do the 12-12 and then slowly build up to 16-8 over a 4 to 6 week period, depending on the individual. And then once we've done 16-8 for usually about 12 weeks, we start to experiment with true fasting, which is a 24-hour fast once a week. And if people feel comfortable doing that, then we do a periodic, what we call rapid healing. And that is a periodic 72-hour fast. We don't push for 5 days with people. If they choose to do it, they do it. And most people find that once they do 3 days, they can go for 5 because your body just adapts.
Mm-hmm.
But a periodic, and I just like to call it the true cleanse. You know, there's all these cleansing diets out there. Nothing cleanses the body like abstinence from food. So, you know, you can pay what you want for juice cleanses and juice detoxes and all of this crap. None of it really works. The best cleanse you could possibly do for your body is to abstain from food for 24 or more hours.
So that's awesome. So we are starting to run short of time. So I'll ask one more question on the muscle loss, and then we'll start getting into, you know, the wrap-up questions. So let's say somebody currently has maybe some mobility issues or maybe some old injuries. You know, how would you suggest they start implementing, you know, you talk about weight training or resistance training into their exercise program?
Okay. Look, I'm a firm believer, and I'm going to say this because I'm a personal trainer. I'm a firm believer that you seek help from a coach, because you don't know what you don't know. You know, there are many benefits to exercise, but it's also quite risky, especially if you start an intervention for the first time after the ages of sort of 50 years old, you know. So you want to make sure that you're doing it under the right supervision. And there are many ways you can do that. You can do an online program, or you can do a face-to-face program. And the majority of time using body weight to exercise is enough. You don't need fancy equipment. And that's what our program is all about, the Foundation Movement System. We like to empower people by teaching people how to master their own body weight first. And then you untether yourself from the need for expensive gyms and things like that. Because the reality is that when you put a barrier in front of yourself, which is I've got to get to the gym, it's far less likely that you follow through with an exercise program. If you know how to do an exercise routine that you can do from the comfort of your own home, then you're going to most likely stick with that more. And as you know, all habits go. Habits are like launching a rocket ship to the moon, as Stephen Covey said in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Oh, yeah. You know, getting your rocket ship or habit out of the atmosphere consumes a lot of energy and fuel, but once you break the Earth's atmosphere, getting to the moon is quite easy. You know, so I like to say keep it nice and simple at the start, and try and do something that that doesn't require expensive equipment and things like that. And then once you've got the ball rolling and you've got some momentum, you can level up your program and potentially join a gym or something like that. You know, that would be my first tip. And my second tip is to make sure that you work with a coach or a program that understands the concept of anatomical structural balance, which is the ability to devise or construct a program that keeps the body well balanced. Because there are lifestyle factors that come into play. Like I'm fairly confident that you'd be doing what I'm doing right now, which is sitting down in a chair. Yeah. And sitting down in a chair is not the best for our physical body. We shorten muscles in the hips and weaken muscles in the core, and we have a tendency to slouch in our upper spine so that the muscles in our chest and our shoulders and the front of our neck shorten and tighten. And we want to find an exercise program that's going to balance all of that out, particularly as we age, because frailty, as I said at the start of this discussion, is really important. It's a high risk factor, you know, and so we want to make sure that our body is in the right anatomical state, that if we do have a fall or come under some sort of unprepared stress mechanism where we need our strength, that we can demonstrate it in all different angles and all different body positions. And and so that's something that I find very important. Very small, quick story. One of my oldest clients is 76 years old now. She had a fall a few years ago where her husband was unwell, and she tried to change a light globe on her own in her kitchen, and she was balancing on a kitchen stool, and it fell from under her, and she fell down onto the hard tiles in her kitchen. Now, a 76-year-old woman, she was 73 at the time, you would usually, that would be a life-changing fall, you know, and she hobbled in with a horrible bruise on the side of her face and on her shoulder, but was completely fine, you know, and I was quite surprised, and I you know, if she wasn't doing the strength training that she'd done with me for sort of 8 years prior to that, I have no doubt in my mind that her bones and her muscles would have been too frail to handle that fall, you know. And if she wasn't flexible in her shoulders and everything when she fell, she would have been in trouble as well. So that's something to consider. Find a coach and a program that understands the concept of anatomical structural balance, meaning that there is a relationship with every joint in the body that needs to be in balance for that joint to be optimal. And there are good coaches out there and good programs that do focus on that.
Oh, I think you guys have one of the programs that definitely focuses on that.
Absolutely, yeah. That's the basis of our we call it our foundations program, and it is to achieve that anatomical structural balance, you know. And that's, I've been coaching people for almost 17 years now, and that's something that I feel is really lacking with a lot of gym. And it goes back to what you said, the microwave society. The training for balance and function is boring, because, you know, it's not to a large degree going to manipulate body composition. You know, people that join a gym generally do it because they want to get lean or they want to get muscular, and training for the foundations doesn't do that, you know. And we have this sort of 12 to 16 week foundations program that is all about posture and all about function and all about flexibility. And a lot of people don't make it through because they get frustrated and go, oh, well, you know, I want to be lifting heavy, or I want to be doing the really advanced stuff. And you just got to be patient in the beginning and make sure that you put the groundwork in, lay the foundation so that you're well prepared for the future.
Definitely. Well, I think that's a good segue into where can people find you or find this foundational movement system, you know, everything that you guys have there. Where can they find you the best way?
That's a very good question, actually. The best way to interact with us is on Facebook, or you can look us up at unitygym.com, and we have all of our information up on the website there. And then also on social media. I know that some people use social media, some people don't. We have a YouTube channel called Unity Gym. And we do, you know, every day we produce a show, much like this one, that's videoed as well, where we discuss these sorts of topics. And we also demonstrate movements that are beneficial to the wider audience. And we put whole workouts up there. So I would certainly say subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's a great resource, and we are all about just giving as much value as possible there. You can connect with us on Facebook or through our website, yeah, you know, we love to work with people. It enables Rad and I to live our purpose, so we're very grateful and very humbled whenever someone works with us, because that's what we're here for. We're here to help people achieve health and happiness, and it's an absolute pleasure when we get to work with new people.
Great. Now, I do have to bring this up. In our pre-interview chat, you mentioned that you're writing a book. And so what is this book about? Do you even have a name for the book yet? Or are you still throwing titles around? We definitely want to, you know, link to it as soon as it's available. I don't know if you have a timeline or anything. I don't know if I'm letting the cat out of the bag, but I definitely want to talk about that. Absolutely.
So I'm writing a book, and I am still throwing titles around. It's 3 sections of the book. It's on mindset, movement, and nutrition. And the current title is the Health Tribus. Tribus is a Latin word for three, and they are the three key components to health that I believe. And so since I've been a teenager, I've been intrigued and obsessed with lifestyle hacking, how to get myself more energy efficient, because I've been acutely aware that time is unmanageable, but energy is. And so that's led me down the path of, I guess you would say, spiritual enlightenment, meditation, things like that, mindset hacking. I've been fascinated with that side of things. Also because at times throughout my life, I've suffered clinical depression. And I was fascinated in learning more about the psychology behind that and how I could disrupt that mechanism and start to really retrain my mind and my brain so that I was more productive and things like that. So the first section of the book is all about that. And the second section is about movement, and it has all of our philosophies through it, the foundation movement system, what we spoke about here, the concept of anatomical structural balance. And then the third section is on nutrition, and we call it our progressive fasting system, which we've spoken a lot about here. So, and what we're also doing is we're launching the book as 3 separate courses that you can do as well. So you can buy it as a book, or you can choose one of those sections and do it as an online course, which will be a series of lessons where you get to interact with me personally and Rad as well. And yeah, look, we're hoping to have that finished by the end of this year and launched and published in 2020, which is my big, hairy, audacious goal.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I'll definitely be looking forward to getting a copy of that. And you mentioned hacking real quick. I got to mention this because since I had the interview with Rad, and he mentioned the benefits of foam rolling, and he mentioned, he's like, how good do you feel afterwards? And I said, man, I feel like I want to take a nap after I do foam rolling. And that comment got me to thinking. I'm like, well, if I want to go to sleep after I foam roll, why don't I just foam roll before I fall asleep at night? And so I have been foam rolling and doing a very light stretching routine from you guys, some of the parts of that 18-minute stretching routine. And I have been having the best sleep of my life since then. So I don't know if this is a sleep hack, if this is something you're already putting into your book, or maybe you should start putting it. I don't even know. But I don't know if there's any science behind that, but that has been phenomenal.
Absolutely. It's interesting to hear. I haven't been aware of it, but it's interesting because I'm a firm believer that doing static stretching and a bit of rolling and myofascial release is very beneficial before bed, because you do a lot of your healing at night. And so I only assume that it's going to, upregulate all of those processes, because you get all that lymphatic drainage. You're getting everything moving through the body, moving through your filtration system right before bed. So I think it's probably just hitting the go button for your healing and restorative sleep, which I'm sure there's someone out there that would be able to explain that the mechanism much better than me. But I am a firm believer that doing a little bit of stretching before bed is very good for you, especially if you're trying to improve flexibility, because you lengthen the tendons and the tissues, and then you go to sleep and heal them in that lengthened state. So I have a habit of, if I'm watching a little bit of Netflix at night, I will try to do a little bit of stretching right before bed. I do about 40 minutes or an hour of Netflix as a bit of an off switch, a wind down at night, which is a little bit of a sleep hack for me, just to get my mind off of work. And then I'll try and read a bit of a book after that, which doesn't happen every night, but it does happen. And that's sort of my off switch, and whilst I do that, I do a bit of stretching, and I certainly feel better for it and feel the benefits. So I like it. I like what you're doing there. I think that you might be onto something.
Oh, great. Yeah, maybe that'll be a part of your book. All right.
Absolutely.
So, last question. I asked this of all of my interviewees. What is something that 20 years from now that you want to see be considered absolutely absurd? Or maybe said another way, in 20 years, if you look back, you can say, man, I can't believe we used to do blank.
I think counting calories is something that is absurd, because our bodies metabolize foods in completely different ways based on our gut microbiome. And I think the more we learn about the gut microbiota, the more we're going to realize that counting calories is just completely ridiculous. Further to that statement, what the American Heart Association has just found on a huge metadata analysis of over 70 nutrition studies is that due to the lifestyle behavior of the scientists doing those studies, they are actually doing time-restricted eating without knowing it. They're feeding the mice at different ends of the day. And you know, we weren't even tracking the timing of food in many of the most popular nutrition studies. So I think the entire nutrition industry is about to get turned on its head with the most recent research on time-restricted eating. And I think we're going to find that the key mechanism to weight loss and health benefits of a lot of diets was actually time-restricted eating, not calorie restriction. So let's see where that goes. It's a big statement, I know, but I think that in 20 years' time, we're going to look back and go, my God, I cannot believe we used to try and tell people to count calories.
I love that, because I've heard it said before that our body is not like a bank account, you know, calories in, calories out. It's more like a chemistry set.
That's exactly right. And the way that the food is processed alters the way that we absorb the calories. Very quick example, peanut butter is far higher in calories for your body than peanuts, because we don't digest the peanut butter as much. And many foods do that. And the way that peanut butter works in your body is going to be different to the way it works in my body based on our gut microbiome. So, you know, 300 calories for you, maybe 400 for me, or 200 for me. And they've found that it can be 25% out. There can be a 25% discrepancy, which is monumental when you're trying to get it right. So yeah, that's I think that's an area that we're going to need to look at.
Well, awesome. Well, Yanni, once again, I feel like we could just keep on going for about another hour, but
you got to be careful with me.
Part 2 or something, you know, sometime and come back.
That's right. You got to be careful. Rad, as always, I can talk underwater about this stuff.
Yeah.
So once you open Pandora's box, you got to have the off button.
Oh, it's been great though. There's a ton of information you dropped on all my listeners, so I appreciate that. And I'd say, you know, I think you're going to help rescue a lot of retirements in the form of, you know, if they follow a lot of the guidelines and maybe even access a lot of the resources that you've made available that we'll include in all the show notes. You know, you're going to help a lot of people either lose weight, gain muscle, all of the above, get more flexible, and just have a better quality of life in retirement. That's what it's all about.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. It's been my pleasure, and I'm humbled to have the invite.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Nate.